You know that great song, I'm Back for More? Well, let me tell you, I am back for more, but not on my own, with Muneer Nasser, who's got so much to say about the history, the people, and indeed the business surrounding this music that we know and love as jazz, and all of that with his incredible analytical scrutiny. We've picked back up with Muneer talking about the late, great Roy Hargrove. Yeah, check out his track called Poetry, and that's with Erykah Badu and Q-Tip. To me, that is it's outstanding. So that's one that I play. Yes. It kind of tells you a story of what it
and
is.
And even Roy, and I talked to his documentarian about this, Ilian, and she was saying it wasn't included in the documentary, but they said he came out of poverty. And there were some domestic kind of challenges that he had. And I said, man, and they talk about his narcotic use, but when you leave that out, it's kind of cheapens that. You know what I'm saying? Not justifying it, but at least give us the foundation, because a lot of people wouldn't even have made it at the house. Drugs are not. You know what I'm saying? When you look at him and consider him in context. That's what I'm saying about telling the story, not just a feel-good story, but conclude the other elements too, because that would be a good component, because the hurt of that, man, is like real. And people don't, they don't process it. And the people that go through it, they don't talk about it. They just self-medicate. Because if you had a mother and my mother hated me, then I'm gonna lie to you. Mother's Day, I would be like everybody else. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so they got to carry that pain a lot of time and hide it and stuff and self-medicate. So and then our generation, we've been through so much. We've been through crack. We've been through all the wars, the Persian Gulf War. The world has changed 3 or 4 times in our lifetime.
Talking about Roy Hargrove.
Yes.
And the reality of Roy Hargrove. Yeah. And you said something.
And then Roy,
you said the pain.
Yeah, of just being poor, man. I mean, when I'm talking about not having food, stuff like that, those kind of challenges. You know what I'm saying? And the pain of that. A lot of these kids are acting out because a hungry man or woman, I'm gonna add that, but Bob Marley said a hungry man is an angry man. Check that out. That says a lot. Like civilization presupposes what? Food, clothing, and shelter. If I take food from you, just your blood sugar and it disrupts. You see people they be in a bad mood, you give them some food, they'll be a whole different, right? They've Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of situation between the fed and the unfed. Bob Marley alludes to that. It's profound. He said a hungry man is an angry man. That's what a lot of people miss too. And so he was able to transcend that. And he was transcend that, not make an excuse, because out of that same environment he came out, he wasn't the only one, but he transcended. My father transcended, was able to make a contribution. And we all can. It's not their exclusive reserve. They're examples of what we all can do. If you're not a musician, bake your cake like they played. If their playing inspired you, take that to your game and raise that level, whatever it is. That's what they're there for, that inspiration. Not just, and we don't worship them because you might have greater in you than they had in them. See what I'm saying? It's more like they're a mirror of that in you. So you go see a cat play like, yeah, I'm going to take this back, even if I clean my room. You know what I'm saying? Or cook a meal, I'm going to try to be on my A game. It's nothing but inspiration. They gave inspiration, and they didn't make excuses. Poor me, I didn't have this. I didn't write about my daddy. I wrote a book. So what? They didn't. I'm just observing it. That Jazz Times, maybe they didn't feel Jamil Nasser was the 7 albums he made with Coltrane and playing with Sonny Rollins and Monk. Maybe that wasn't important to them, even though they're a jazz magazine. These are some of the greatest jazz. But that's their house. That's what they control. If they decide not to mention them, that's just a decision they make. I could put some emotion in it, but they just made a decision not to invite them into their home. But guess what? We did it on our own. We wrote the book so we don't need them. The push could have helped, but it didn't stop. That's what we have to do. Let's stop crying for these people's validation and just go to work. That's all you got to do. Stop waiting for people. They, like, for example, and I see that in London, some of the musicians, they jealously guard their little contacts. I asked a couple of them. I tested what you was talking about. They holding on to. And I didn't even need it because I just go right to the club owner and rent a place and then put on your show. You don't wait for them to call you. I didn't need his contact. But my father in 1984, I put in a book, Cool Jazz Festival didn't invite them. They put on their own festival. Yeah, it's a shame, and you can talk about it's unfair. Damn that. They put on their own festival. Either you're going to do it or not. So what? So what, they blocking you out? So what, there's racism? Get us a little space, sell tickets, set up some chairs, invite your friends, invite your family, invite the people that want to come and do business. That's what the hip hoppers did. They sold out their car. They didn't wait for the system to validate them. That's one thing to their credit. Now, I gave them a negative report. Let me put the positive spin on the hip hop. They took care of business. They walked in with Uzi and said, you're going to give us our masters back. You know what I'm saying? We taking our publishing. You know, they took care of business. They're documenting. They're doing documentaries. They're taking care of more business than the jazz cats are. That's the reality. And Winton called them ignorant, and he was wrong. They're not ignorant. They're not as ignorant as you think. They were a lot smarter than jazz cats on the business because they had to hustle. They came out of an environment where they had to do it on their own. They're not waiting around. See, that mentality you're talking about, that's people waiting for a gig. I'm not going to give you. That's stupid stuff. It's not going to empower them. That's why nobody's getting nowhere. I bet you if you look at them cats, that's why everybody's disempowered. That's doing a gig. But you got to ask somebody to, okay, you practice, you develop your craft, and then you got to ask somebody if you could present it to the public. That's foolish, man. And for people that profess to want freedom and to fight for freedom, and y'all did it there like we did it here.
I did it.
The Mangrove and all that. I've been watching the documentaries about New Cross. I mean, when it came time to take a stand, people would come out in the street and fight, and they have to do that, not just reacting to people being killed. Do it on a constructive basis, on a proactive basis. Just like, okay, we want to showcase our music. Go rent out a space. What's the problem? You got to wait for somebody to do this. It's really retarded. A lot of times it's our own retardation. It's not racism. We're waiting for somebody to do something, and they don't want to do it. It don't matter if they're racist or not. Who cares? They don't want you in their house. So build your own house and then showcase the musician and the music you want. It's just that simple. And there's that same energy we use about complaining and talking about what they don't do and how it's unfair and racism. And they brought us here in the Windrush in 48, and they used us to read the World War II, and it's unfair. It was like you could just, and it's not going to change. They've been saying that for how long? That's been the song for how long? It's not going to change. Write your own song, get the venue, sell the tickets, get on the internet, and do your own business. Right?
Well, on writing your own song, Mr. Nasser, what are you up to now?
Well, I'm preparing for probably one of the biggest concerts I've done, period, particularly in this area, at the Sculpture Garden, National Gallery of Art. For Juneteenth, I'm doing a performance there with the musicians that joined me on my first album as a leader, A Soldier Story, and that's Elijah Easton, a tremendous tenor saxophone player, just a fire breather. I mean, this man is just on fire. We have Alan Johnson, a great pianist from this area. James King, who works with Gary Bartz. He's Gary Bartz' regular basis. You've probably seen him. If you've seen Gary Bartz in the last 20 years, you've seen him. John Lamkin, who worked with Kenny Garrett, Benny Golson. So I got the A team with me. And so we're coming out of the pandemic. We lost some opportunity and momentum because of the pandemic. We're trying to regain that. I just came from the Frankfurt Book Fair. So I'm trying to expand this book into foreign markets. I'm going to do an audio book soon. And I'm planning another album, of course. I got to release another album and some singles, because I have some stuff it's not all jazz. Like I said, I love Stevie Wonder, Earth, Wind, and Fire. I was raised on all that. And all that music, Stevie Wonder could walk on anybody's jazz, bandstand and be at home, as well as those cats from Earth, Wind, and Fire. So really, this music is more interconnected and related to all these other genres, including hip-hop. Jay-Z, Feeling It, that's from Jamal Plays Jamal. My father's bass is on that. See?
Oh, is it?
So
I didn't
Yeah,
know that. I
Ice-T,
didn't know
De
that.
La Soul. There's about 7 or 8 rappers that have sampled, and they carried the music from the 70s of James Brown. That music never went anywhere. If you recall, look at Fight the Power. The James Brown song that was used by sampled by Public Enemy. It just carried, they repopularized it. Or some of the George Clinton stuff, Me, Myself, and I, and by De La Soul, and the one that Kirk Franklin did, Stomp. And so, but unfortunately, George Clinton got cheated out of the royalties, so they didn't get the money from the Belady and the guy who bought the catalog. Well, he sold the catalog. He capitalized off all those samples because he probably saw it coming. These people could see their planet horizon is way beyond us. By the time we saw streaming, remember we thought Little Richard, he was only getting 3 pennies a record. Well, they getting 1/1000th of a penny now per play, So it's even worse than the 50. So stuff is going bad. And by the time we find out about it, by the time you find out the conspiracy, guess what? It's too late to do anything about it. See? And so that's what and so even like with my father, that's what he had to fight, like a soldier story. That's the title of my CD, because these guys were soldiers, man. They had to, even after the kind of background they had. He came to New York with Phineas Newborn, man, in 56. They were waiting for Phineas. He didn't come in obscurity. He was catapulted into the center of the jazz world. When they came to Birdland, opened at Birdland, everybody was there. Anybody that was anybody that was anybody, I like that, was there, And I talk about that, the opening. And so after that, he was freelance and everybody knew he was. So he started recording with Red Garland and Kenny Drum, Hank Mobley, and just started. He was right in the center of the jazz world. And he had to face that. A lot of these people were addicted, man. Imagine if everybody on your job was strung out around and you saw them come to the town clean, not smoking cigarettes, didn't do nothing. The next thing you know, they nodding on you elbowing them because they nodded in the middle of talking to you. And you're like, man, what happened? And he had story after story like that. And he warned musicians against that. So these guys had to fight through a lot of racism in the South. You're talking about the civil rights movement. Well, a Hotel Wallahaji. My father was in the special service. Tyler Perry has in Atlanta, he just bought the name. I don't know why this name escapes me now. Anyway, they were stationed down there. It'll come back to me. I can't believe Fort McPherson. Sorry,
Okay.
Fort McPherson. Tyler Perry just bought. My father was on that base with Leonard Nimoy, who became Mr. Spock. Wynton Kelly, Phineas Newborn, Lewis Smith, the trumpet player, Duke Pearson. They were all in the special services together. Kim Berry from F Troop, and they played at a place called the Hotel Wallahaji, which is on the campus of Clark, Atlanta. Currently, the building is still there. In Martin Luther King's neighborhood, they had an integrated jam session and club in 1953. Check this out. And the owner was Chief Aiken. He was a Native American chief that loved Wynton Kelly. And he bought Wynton Kelly, and Wynton Kelly brought down Charlie Rouse and Paul and New York Cats. And they had an integrated jazz club right in Martin Luther King's neighborhood in 1953. Few people know about it. What's my point? The point is the point you were making earlier. The music was breaking down barriers before any of this other stuff. That's why when Papa Joe told me a story, said that SNCC, a representative from Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee called SNCC, that fought during the Civil Rights Movement, came backstage to ask Ella Fitzgerald to participate in the march. He didn't even let her answer. He said, can I curse? No curse? Can I curse? He said, get the fuck out of here. She's been marching. And I experienced him yelling at me at 72. I could only imagine, because he was a loud man. He would rock a room. He said, get the fuck out of here. She's been marching. But veins bulging out, looking at him, And the point was, these people been fighting up and down the highways in the South. You know about the Green Book?
Yes, I
in
do.
the 50s? That was suicidal. That was nothing less than suicidal, borderline, at that time. You had to talk about calling. You had to love this music and be called to it because their lives were definitely at risk, every step of the way. And so they would break it down. And some of those people said, hey, we don't care about segregation. We want to hear the music. And they were willing to go in, intermingle with anybody who was there. They didn't care who was there. They were there for the music. And so that transcended, and it played out in the world too. Because my father went behind the Iron Curtain in 1960 before, and not just him. No, I know it's a lot, but this is one last flagship point that's in the book, just to show you in points of this. I went to San Diego in California, and they had the largest collection of books I've seen on jazz diplomacy. Then the Smithsonian did a documentary called The Jazz Ambassadors. And I went to see the debut right down here in DC, right downtown. I had my first copy of the book, and it had just come in the mail like a day before, my review copy. So I was like, yeah. So I went in, I stood up, I said, well, you missed something. He said, what? I said, well, my father with Oscar Denard and Dries Suleiman and Buster Smith, they went to Russia and Poland in 1960, and they were preceded by Mitchell and Roth, two African Americans. And I pulled up the Jet article on my phone to show him. I said, I can understand you article look at my father, but Mitchell and Roth, their tour was well publicized in the Jet, major network, and he wrote a book called Cultural Assembly, where he has a whole chapter on it. They missed it. And that's what they do, and that's what they're going to do. We have to write our own history. We fought for freedom. Let's use it. You know what I'm saying? We shouldn't still be waiting around for people to write about our great, leaders and musicians. Because if I wouldn't, and I went to the Rutgers Jazz Institute, beautiful institution, but I sat at the computer and I put my father's name, and if we had to rely on that particular institution to document his history, ooh, Lord, you find more on the internet.
Yeah.
You do more Googling his name than going to their research institution to find out about him. That's why I had to do this book, because this stuff would have just went into the ground, like most of it does. Most of this information these guys take to grave. Ahmad Jamal, rest in peace, he does not have a book out. So how are you going to know his story? You could know part of it from reading this. The part that my father shared is in here. I don't know where you're going to get the rest of it from. Unless I'm wrong. Maybe in the interim, he said in interviews, he told people throughout the years that he wasn't interested in writing a book. See what I'm saying? And a lot of people kind of take that position for whatever reason. But Malcolm X, he was a great speaker, right? A great leader. You know why people know about him? Because he wrote a book. That's why they know about Malcolm X, because of the book he published. And he said he didn't expect to read it. But he had the foresight to know how important that would be to preserving his legacy. Not his speeches. You ask people, most people how they heard of Malcolm X, it's through his book. That's way before the movie. The movie didn't come into the 90s. And so that's the importance of writing. We're losing a lot. Just the people I interviewed for this book. They talk about 1619. My father and them did the Memphis Beale Street Music Festival, right? It generated this month. It's about to go on in a couple of days, if not now. It generates hundreds of millions of dollars, at least over, they said $140 million. Well, Irvin Salke, an African-American lawyer, put up $70,000 of his own personal money in 1977 to make that festival happen. There's no jazz there. They just erected a blues stage recently. They have all these hip-hoppers, people that had here, back to hip-hop. They had nothing to do with that. And I talked to Jim Holt, the president, and told him this. It still sits on the foundation of jazz and blues. I don't care what you say about its current status of not being able to draw people. It still rests on that foundation, therefore should be included in some kind of way. And so that's 1977. So I said, we don't have time to talk about 1619. I'm still trying to clarify and solidify the history from 1977. That's a trick bag. Don't fall for it, because they got you looking back there when you need to be looking around here, because then you could get Ahmad Jamal's history before he dies, before worrying about Blind Tom and what he did in the 1800s. See, that's the trick. You stand a greater chance of learning about a person that lived around in your time than somebody hundreds of years ago. Nobody alive that knew him. You could talk to people around that knew and played with Ahmad now. So that's the difference.
It's it really is fascinating, Muneer, and you know, I love how proactive it all is. I love how you're basically about today. Yes, you're about yesterday,
Yes,
the stories of yesterday, but you're about today and you're about
yes,
tomorrow.
yes,
You really are, because what you're doing, I believe anyway, should we call it the correction of history, or the work that you're doing, certainly in terms of your book, certainly in terms of your articles, certainly in terms of the way that you're promoting who and what your dad was. It's not your dad, it's your dad plus 300 other musicians or however many that he also had the pleasure of sharing a stage with. And, you know, as I say, it's kind of like adding the seasoning, if you like, or the flavor to what we
right,
thought we knew of. As just like if somebody cooks a chicken and they don't put anything on it, it tastes nothing, but you season it up, suddenly
right.
it tastes completely different. It's like that. This information, these snippets of information, and it's so difficult for me to sort of, as I say, I've got so many things written down here. You talked about the significance of changing the name,
Yes.
and you sort of glossed over it. What is the significance? Why was it so important for
Okay.
people we're talking about? So we've got Ahmad,
Okay.
Jamal,
Um,
your
if you
dad.
look at if you look at New York, for instance, right? A lot of people know that there was a store called Bloomstein's, right? Just to give an example, in New York. And so at one time they wouldn't hire any African Americans in Harlem to work there. And so there was a Muslim named Sufi Hamid that led a demonstration against Bloomstein's. And he was succeeded by Adam Clayton Powell, Reverend Adam Clayton Powell. But they factored him out of history and they put Adam Clayton Powell in as the one who initiated that. So at this time, Dizzy Gillespie said there were a lot of Jewish booking agents in New York that didn't like Muslims. This is simple truth. And so when it came to booking, if it was a Muslim and it was somebody that had a Christian name, the person with the Christian name would most likely get it. So my father changed his name like that in New York. Half of his work went out the window. See, because Israel was just being established in, there was conflicts in that regard. And so they just got caught in the middle of it. It predates my father. Idris Suleiman, he couldn't buy a gig at a certain point. That gave impetus to the whole idea of leaving America
Yeah.
because he got tired of not working his own admission. So they set themselves up for discrimination, but they couldn't accept Christianity. They just didn't agree with it. And then when they studied the history of it, that you're taking your slave master is giving you a religion. Well, how is it going to liberate you? A slave master's interest can't be in your liberation, spiritual or otherwise. So why would you accept a religion and a way of life from that person? See? And so, and they investigated different religions, but Islam resonated with them and it necessitated a change in identity, which separated them from their family, you know what I'm saying, from their community, and put them at odds with the people that control work and opportunity. So it was no decision to be made lightly. So you're talking about a calling and being committed. Both those gentlemen were, because there were many more Muslims, but here's the key, they didn't change their name. See that? Including Suleiman Saud, the late Suleiman Saud. You know who that was?
Yeah.
McCoy Tyner.
Oh no.
But I mean, I'm
I
not
celebrate
judging
it.
him. I'm just telling you what he did. He elected to keep the name McCoy Tyner because, hey, it would keep his work flowing. You can't decry a man for wanting to feed his family, you know. But then there were cats like my father and Ahmad that said, hey, regardless, well, my father didn't have a family then, you know, but he made a decision nonetheless. But then we had to take up that. I mean, having this name, I had this name since 1967. Having a Muslim name in the 70s,
Yeah.
please ask anybody. You saw what Muhammad Ali went through?
Yeah.
We had to do a lot of talking and educating, even when we didn't want to. The class started with us, with why we got a name like that, and everybody else didn't. So I had to be a teacher, whether I wanted to or not, you know, on a weekly basis. And I had to deal with some ignorance, discrimination, and comments, all the stuff that the LGBT community talks about. We dealt with that stuff. We're on the front lines with that. So now people could be Muslim comfortably because we took a lot of that weight, you know, and dispelled a lot of that ignorance. You know, so that was a rough road, man. I mean, you know, across the board for those guys, you know. And definitely for him. He said, I have him on tape saying, I'm putting in a documentary. He said when he changed his name, half his work went out the window. And then people would call and say, hey, man, if you go back to that George Joyner identity, you know. Now you see who runs Newport Festival. I'm not going to mention no names, but when George Joyner became Jamil Nasser, there was no more Newport Festival. Not for Jamil Nasser. The Newport Festival was for George Joyner. But when George Joyner became Jamil Nasser, no more Newport Festival. You could look at it from 1956 up to now. You won't see his name in there. So that's just the kind of stuff they went through. They weren't bitter about it. They weren't mad about it because they felt like this is a spiritual path that the Creator put them on and that the reward would be much bigger. So they were willing to sacrifice whatever they wouldn't get in terms of the world rewards of this life to be who they were.
It's incredible, you know, you're talking about acceptance and you're talking about sacrifice. And, you know, these are things that we talk about now as though it's something that's new, as you say, and this is something that was going on. It was going on so long ago.
And
You
please
talk
give
about,
homage to those people. And I say that because it's important to recognize that. Because some of these people initiate these groups and they don't give homage to the people that laid the foundation
yes,
for them to even do a lot of these things.
yes,
You know, and
yes.
so that's even the health, even in terms of health. Muslims were the first. We don't eat pork. Like what? For you to say that in the 70s, man, are you kidding me? Do you know what that meant? What you don't celebrate Christmas and you don't do this, you don't do this. So you're alienated within a culture. So you're a minority within, because now your own Black people, to use that term,
Yes.
don't accept you. Because now you're doing something that you don't eat with everything they eat, and you don't worship like they do. So there are points of departure between you and your race and the people around you. See? And at a time where there's not a lot of support. Now they say happy Ramadan, happy Kwanzaa. Before it was just Merry Christmas. That was it. So the diversity has grown, but we come from that time like they didn't even acknowledge you. It's Merry Christmas. Any other religion you got, that's your business. But in the terms of the business of America and what's being acknowledged, it's Merry Christmas. Nothing else counts. And that's how we were treated. That's the short version of the story. And then you do hit, of course, you're going to hit frustration points. Like I say that it didn't bother, but there's times it got to them, to be honest with you, you know.
Of course. Of course.
But that's what they went through, and that's what's separate. That's why you don't see Jamil Nasser's name on as many records that you see some of the other people. That would be because you listen to the bass playing, you could clearly hear that he's on par with any of those guys that you could mention. He was in that group with Wilbur Ware, Paul Chamber, any of those guys. Those were his cats. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
He respected them and vice versa. Reggie Work, all those guys respect Jamil Nasser, even the ones that are alive. Because those guys, they didn't go to the bar. They didn't chase women. The dope man wasn't coming to them. They had to conduct themselves in a certain way. You know what I'm saying?
yes, I do, absolutely.
And that inspired people to try to live clean and to look at life a little bit differently. When they saw those cats disciplined, y'all playing music, there's drugs, there's women all around, and y'all not interested in none of it. And people watched that, and they were positively affected by that, by their discipline too, and how they carried themselves in those environments. Because they weren't supposed to be there. They weren't supposed to be in no bars as Muslims anyway. But sometimes you got to go into the dens of iniquity. But when they went in there, they went as examples. So maybe they were supposed to be there anyway.
It's incredible. You mentioned Dizzy Gillespie lots, and I know that he was huge in your life. I'm going to ask you, can you just give me one fond memory, you and him?
Well, that memory is shared with Antonio Parker, a saxophonist from this area. In fact, he wrote a series of books based on this interaction, and he puts it in the introduction of his book. This is about 1990. He was awarded, he was given an award at the Black Caucus. This is at the Sheraton Hotel in D.C. And so we saw Dizzy Gillespie going into the restroom. So he came out, he's washing his hand. So we walked over and Tony said, "Hey, Dizzy Gillespie, how do you get through the chord changes?" So he stopped. He looked at him. He looked at me and he put his finger up to his lip. He said, sit at the piano and see how the chord changes are moving. And so he sat down and started figuring out different formulas of how to get through the songs and the chord change. And he put those, hundreds of them in this book from that one moment, that Dizzy Gillespie. And so that to me is the flagship moment of being close and asking him a question about music, that he answered. And from that time, I tried to learn piano too, because he was big on that. He said, if you cannot play piano, it's going to be very difficult to play jazz, because it's a complex music. You have to see it, to really understand it. You have to hear it and see it. And the piano allows for you to do that. And so to me, that's one of in addition to seeing them at the Jazzmobiles and seeing them different places, but that's the time I got to really be close and hear him answer. I didn't ask the question, but I heard him answer.
No, because Terence Blanchard, who I met and have interviewed a couple of times, he told me a really funny story about how when he was in the Messengers, and how Dizzy used to carry a knife, and that was so that he always got paid, because of course the people didn't pay. So that was the story that Terence Blanchard shared.
He used that knife too. He cut somebody.
Yes, the way that
he cut Calloway.
Yes.
Yeah, he cut. That story about that, right? Cab Calloway fired him, and they got into a little scuffle, and he ended up kind of nicking him with the knife. That's how he got fired.
Oh, right.
Yeah, okay, there's one recorded incident of him actually using that knife. But
okay,
that's another thing. To your point now, in Hempstead, they had this place called Danzy's Retreat, and it was an African American entrepreneur. He loved the music. He had a little club. He wanted to, showcase the musician. So he invited my father and my father, boy Harold Mayburn and George Coleman in there. And man, it took this cat at least 3 years to pay my father. I mean, he paid the band off. He straightened those guys out. And every time he would come to Hempstead, we would drive up there to this club, and he just paid them in dribbles and drabs, man. It took him about 3 years to pay that bill, because there was like 3 of us in the audience. So he lost his shirt. And so my father said, hey, man, he's trying to do business, so I'm just being patient with him, because at least he made the effort. And so just stuff like that, efforts like that to, to help, to your point about, entrepreneur. And I remember Cecil Bridgewater lived in our town, Warren Smith, the drummer, and Cecil Bridgewater played at the public library. We went to see him. He introduced us from the audience, it's Jamil Nasser's children and stuff like that. And so, yeah, man, it was just it was a good environment, just a good environment.
It sounds like it. It sounds like, when I was reading the beginning bit of stuff where, I was saying before that you earn your stripes, if you like, coming up with these old guys,
oh my goodness,
basically
man.
saying, not like that.
Yeah, those guys were they didn't play with the music. You really realize that. I mean, it's fun and it sounds like that, but in terms of presenting the music, there was a certain standard, and they didn't compromise that. Those guys were rough, and they had no problem publicly embarrassing you and letting people know you are not cutting it. But at the same time, if you get it, they'll let you know, and they'll give you compliments and support. But they let it be known what I was telling you before. This music is not a game, man. People live by this. I know it's seen as entertainment now, and that's another thing to just broaden the scope of this music. Like Robert Smith is now talking about financing kids to go to Carnegie Hall to learn music, not to pursue it professionally, just to expand their mind, their creativity, because they found that people involved in music, they perform better academically, because it teaches you focus. It teaches you discipline. You know what I'm saying? You have to practice every day. You don't skip a day. And so you could apply that to anything else, that discipline. It applies to reading, and so they're starting to discover this in education, the importance of music. And so that's another reason we have to keep it alive until these people realize, because look at the budget for like war. How come that's never I got my Obama healthcare benefits, and every year, did we cut this? And you can't get this. We can't, your teeth, we can't fix that. We don't want to prove. But how come the war budget is never cut? But when it comes to me getting teeth and little basic stuff, or a little bit of food, there was a food line. Now I live in Montgomery County, right? This is outside of Gaithersburg in Maryland, right outside DC. This is probably one of the richest counties in the country. There was a food line that down this block, man, like about a mile long, for people in their car lined up for food.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. It's still a challenging time.
Yeah.
But it's always been a challenging time for us as African Americans. But we got work to do now, and we're gonna brag about this internet. Let's use it, because we can talk about racism, discrimination all we want, but you notice we still talking about Martin Luther King. Why are we still talking like we still in the rearview mirror? You were saying, I appreciate your remarks about keeping it contemporary, because that's very important. Because a lot of time we end up worshiping the past, and that's no good. We needed that at one time to buttress our ego, but at this phase in our development of where we're supposed to be, we need to be analyzing history. What did they do wrong? Yeah, I know they could play. What didn't they do? Oh, they didn't own their masters. Well, that's what we need to do. Yeah. They didn't own the venues that they played in. Yeah. Are there any Black-owned clubs in England? I think in England, they didn't let y'all own nothing. Like in America, they had Black communities where they had clubs, Smalls, the Cotton Club, not the Cotton Club, but Sylvia's, Connie's Inn, some of the clubs, okay, within the Black community were owned by Blacks, and some of the theaters were ran by them. But you can't do an umbrella analysis. Yeah. You'd actually have to know which ones were. But I think that gave a sense of we can do it on our own. Like I was telling you, don't wait around for people to showcase you. Put on your own concerts. That's what we have to do. See? And so they let us have Black Wall Street, but they burnt it down. See? But we built it. We showed the capacity to build. Like the civil rights movement, a lot of people don't know. Guess what? And they didn't teach us that. That was the second one. They passed more stringent civil rights bills after the Civil War with the land grant colleges, Howard, Shaw University, all the Black colleges were land grant colleges. Do you know most of the presidents of Howard University were white? There was 18 presidents that's the school I graduated from, right? You think of Howard University in America, you think yes. Black be Black. Well, out of 18 presidents, 12 of them were white, including the first one. They didn't teach it. I didn't learn that until 2 weeks ago. I graduated from there in 1992. See what they do with history? Why didn't they teach us that? They wanted us to think that it's a Black university. So they got to hide that history. But Lerone Bennett Jr. called the civil rights movement the second Reconstruction. And in school, they didn't teach it. They made us think like that was the first time with Martin Luther King in them. No, they had better civil rights legislation passed back then. So that was the second time. 100 years later, they had to revisit the same issue again that was taken care of, or supposedly taken care of back in 1865. So that's how this system is. They give you something, they take, and when you get comfortable and start looking away and partying, because look at 1967 when I was born. Then look at 1977. You go from the riots and the organization, the next movement was the disco movement. Everybody was partying and dancing and doing coke and getting high. You know what I'm saying? So that's why we didn't get it. That was a disconnect with us. They lost all that. Then they had the disco movement, and disco disconnected. Disconnection. They put it right in the term. They're going to disconnect you using the music. Disco music. Let's disconnect them from all that constructive activity and revolutionary activity that was going on in the 60s. We're going to do that in the 70s. Hence, disco. Well, there should be something written about that. That's another book, by the way. That's something to be written about.
It is another book, and you talk about it as though it's like a they thing, and something was happening from on high. It was like
there was some play, a lot of planning goes. Yes, that's what we sleep on. A lot of time we think the stuff that's just happening by accident. No, man, they plan this stuff. They do.
Muneer, I've asked everybody as their final question to give me a track that they wish that they could have written. Do you have one? Is there anything that you wish? Is there anything that you admire by anybody that you think to yourself? And
Oh,
especially because you go across all the genres as well. So it's going to be hard for you. Keep it in jazz. That'll keep it narrow. Keep it
you
in,
saying like a composition or
yeah.
a
Like
recording?
just it is so amazing that, I wish
You know,
that was
as you
mine.
say that just off the break, I wish I could have composed a tune like Daydream by Billy Strayhorn.
Yeah,
The beauty and the lushness, especially that bridge, man. The
yeah,
way that bridge, oh my God, it's like it
yeah.
just gets to my core when I hear it. But in terms of if you listen to Clifford Brown playing Night in Tunisia, man, that the one that's supposed to be his last, to me, instead of a quintessential trumpet performance that's captured on record, man, that's so scary that I can't listen to it too often now. He's playing so much and so hard and so definite.
He's
And
another one.
so,
He's another one. Heartbreaking story. Clifford
yeah.
Brown. Heartbreaking.
But this showed you how you could be young like that and still, this man died at 25 years to achieve so much in that short amount of time. It's not a matter of like when you die, how long you live. It's like the contribution you make.
What you did when you were here.
Yeah,
So,
that's
and
important.
and you mentioned Miles, and you mentioned Miles and moved on. Did you have any particular connection with him at all?
Because I was disappointed because I was listening to Working and Steaming, and I was excited that Miles, because he was in retirement by the time I started listening to him. And we were excited when he was coming back, but the music he started, that man, I didn't like it. And so I was kind of frustrated with Miles Davis, man. I kind of protested him. I made a point not to go. That's how narrow my mind was at that time, and I was so transfixed on Straight Ahead. I had many opportunities I could have saw Miles. I just refused to do it. And then my friend Mike that died, he had an influence too. He said, man, I ain't paying $40 or $50. Because at that time, they said he would play a couple of notes and just play
I
on the
know, I
piano,
know.
and people were spending $50 and $60 just literally to
See
see
him. Yeah, I
because
know.
he wasn't playing that much. And
No.
that was, I could have got the money, but man, at that time in the early 80s, $60 in America, what I mean? It's like,
I didn't realize at all. That is a lot of money.
but I liked his mystique. I liked his confidence. You know what I'm saying?
Like
The
his
fact he was
attitude.
focusing. I mean, those characteristics that he exhibited, it was like he told them, look, I'm going to do 2 sets. That's it. When he didn't want to go to work, he just didn't show up. That independence of spirit, that courageousness. And then they said somehow being black was like a deficit. And look how dark he was and successful. You know what I'm saying? And he kind of flashed that.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? And for people of darker hue, that's powerful, that you could be powerful, great, and unapologetic, and black as the inside of the chimney, like Pele was, and then say, hey, do with me what you will, world. You know what I mean? You was wrong. You know what I'm saying? You're wrong about skin color. You know what I'm saying? The creator puts it in who he wants to. It doesn't matter how they look. You know? And so they've made, I call them crayon people, because when you're in kindergarten, you pay attention to colors. So they make us color conscious because they're trying to roll us back to kindergarten, where you pay attention to painting and colors and
But you're saying they again. Who is the they? Who is the they
the
here?
people. Well, I'll tell you who they are to a certain extent. When they talk about this world being owned by 1/8 of 1% of the people
All right.
control the
Okay.
wealth. Look at Clear Channel. They own 100 stations. And around the time that started happening, jazz started being pushed off the air. They started pushing them off the label. This all started happening at the same time. Clinton passed the omnibus crime bill. Then the hip hop went up that was taking people to jail. The jazz went off the air. They stopped, talk about that plan. If you really line this stuff up, you can really see that's exactly. But if you don't make the connection, you don't do the research, you won't see it. This has been planned, and it's people in Congress. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
President Clinton himself. Look, he picked up that saxophone, went to McDonald's and got coffee, and he passed that 3 strike, all that stuff that was putting African American young men, a lot of them innocent, first crime, they were going to jail for life. He orchestrated that. And Tavis Smiley mistakenly called him the first black president against the backdrop. That's why I don't really respect his intelligence that much. When he said that, I was done with him. Because that means he discounted all that stuff that Clinton did. But just stuff like that, when you said if you go look through era and who was running it and what the agenda was, you could actually name the names. You know, you could get close enough to name some names of people that really participated in that. But we don't do that kind of research.
Well, you know what you could do, you could say everything that you've said today and be very sort of bitter. And you're not bitter at all. I think what I love is, number one, is the curiosity. But it's your attitude, and it's your kind of your quest for life and knowledge, and the fact that, you know, stop messing about and it's down to you, and get on with it and do it now. I just love that, this whole idea of don't wait for somebody, it's up to you and off you go. And it really, really shines through. I mean, I feel totally inspired. I'm sort of thinking, you know, as I was messing about before and saying I was going to change my branding and say that this is all about the chosen people. I've just nicked Oscar Brown Jr.'s quotes, which is, he said that he wanted to make music that was meaningful. Let me get it right. He wanted to give you something with a swing, with meaningful content. That's what it is. Right, so I'm giving you something with a swing, but with meaningful content. I dismissed Oscar Brown Jr. I hated that dare. I didn't know Oscar Brown. No, I did. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And I hate that whole idea of black people kind of singing like that. But I actually played Oscar Brown Jr. a few weeks ago in a show and did some research and found out who he was. And as I say, I've now nicked his quote. This, you know, music, you know, something, I can't remember what it is. It's something with a swing with meaningful content, because that's sort of what I'm trying to do. You know, I say news with a groove. But also I found out who he was in terms of the stuff that he did and the stuff that he actually said. So me dismissing him because I didn't like that dare was all to do with me, and not liking that because of my childhood, and nothing to do with Oscar Brown Jr. and the wonderful man and work that he did. So,
and you know, I had to come to terms with that, because even with someone like Louis Armstrong, and Jack Johnson, the fact they were able to smile, that's revolutionary, because the system wants you to be angry. All of this stuff is designed to make you angry, to make you frustrated. And then once you get in that state, you're not good to anybody. And so it's revolutionary to be able to transcend that and not let that bitterness creep in. So he was able to, because he was able to smile through all the stuff he went through. Come on, man. That's nothing but revolutionary if you could really think of it, because he wasn't supposed to end up like that. He was supposed to be bitter, mad, angry, mumbling in the street, cursing everybody, using every drug known to man, eventually die and just wither away. That's what the plan is. Somebody plans for you to be like that because it makes money and it serves somebody's interests. Like these dead bodies of these young men they picking off the streets of Chicago, where do you think their organs are going? If a kidney goes for $80,000 or $90,000, you think these young African Americans, they scraping up off the city, you think them organs are going in the ground? They're worth more dead than alive. And if you don't believe me, you think I'm talking regular, go look up on Google how much a healthy liver costs, how much a healthy kidney costs. And they have something in New York called the organ mobile, that when these people die, they go right there, chop, 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 and they put their organs on ice and send them around the world. So if they don't get you in prison, and they get you and you shot down on these streets in Chicago like it's happening every night, their organs are it's a meat market. It's literally a meat market for young black organs. Who doesn't know? I don't mean to sound like Dick Gregory, and I don't mean to sound morbid. And this is not a theory. You could look this up. If you think I'm lying, look up the organ mobile on Google and look up how much kidneys cost, and think they're going to let that money just go away and just put that in the ground and burn it and incinerate it. I don't think so. So we got to be aware of these things, but don't, because the thing is, it's not about being morbid. Don't make yourself a target. Don't make yourself a target. If a man got a gun, don't talk back to him. Don't say, what are you stopping me? They got the authority to stop you. They don't have to tell you why they stopping you. Just comply and live to see another day. Don't jump out the car, don't run, don't do none of that stuff. Don't grab. We need to tell our children that. You know what I'm saying? So they could play a role in surviving. That's very important. You're not going to be the institution as an individual unless you have a group of people backing you. And that was a great thing about our leaders. Think, if Martin Luther King was on that mall by himself, would we be listening to the I Have a Dream speech? The only thing that made him powerful on that day or that speech was that people listened to it. So the people conferred the power on him by being there.
Yes.
If they didn't follow him in the bus boycott, they kept their monies in their pocket. That's how they changed the system. And then they tried a moral appeal in between, but he had to come back to what? Economics, the poor people's campaign. 1968 Memphis, they let us say, I've been to the mountaintop and I looked over and I've seen the promised land. That was the weakest part of the speech. There was 40 minutes to that speech. They let us hear the last 2 minutes.
I know.
You go listen to the speech, you'll know why. See, we talking about information. He talked about boycotting the bank and taking your money out of the, just what Jesse Jackson did with Operation Breadbasket. That's how he made his fortune based on what he heard Dr. King say in that last speech was the basis for Operation Breadbasket and everything Jesse Jackson did after that.
What are you going to leave us with, Mr. Muneer Nasser?
Well, I'm saying, please try to support what we're doing, because if we don't get support, how is this going to take place? Like I said, we need to write. If I name the musicians just in this book that are gone, that didn't leave. Okay, Lou Donaldson, they say, has a memoir. Okay, he's had it since 1987. Why isn't it out? You know, Notes and Tones, this book everybody brags about as this great historical book. He had to self-publish it because no New York publisher would publish it. And he had interviews with Miles and Monk when they weren't doing interviews. That was the selling point of the book. They still weren't interested at that time. In New York, I'm not talking about in Mississippi and nowhere else. I'm saying in New York.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot more writing to do. So we need support. I need people to buy the book, you know, and to support. Because there's other things I want to do. I have a documentary I want to do. And so I end up refunneling whatever resources I get back into other I know everybody don't read books. That's why I'm working on a documentary. I got video footage. I have interview footage. You know, because my father was a storyteller. Like I said in the beginning of the interview, if you sat down, he would sit down and talk to you. He was accessible. A lot of these cats, man, they're gonna go smoke on their break. They got a woman they need to talk to. You might get to answer one question. That's it. They're not gonna have a private audience with you on their break. He would. And he's done it many times because people have come and told me. And so the surprising thing would have been for him not to have a book. You know, not the fact that he had, because he did radio interviews. He talked about Phineas. Like they said, Phineas newborn came to New York, went to crazy, had a nervous breakdown. No, that's not the story. He wanted to own himself. And he told RCA no. Just like Sam Cooke, who you mentioned, he left RCA. Elvis complained about his deal there, right? And so they were on RCA at the same time. Sam Cooke, Phineas Newborn, and Elvis Presley. And they all complained about being exploited. But the only difference was when Phineas complained, he couldn't recover. Sam Cooke and Elvis recovered and went on to lucrative careers. He didn't. He was whitelisted and banned from the industry, you know? And my father told his story on radio interviews, but if you didn't hear it, hey, you didn't get it. Oscar Denied was one of the greatest pianists that ever lived. That's what Ahmad Jamal said. Monty heard him. Randy Weston. This book talks about him for the first time. He grew up in St. Petersburg, Florida. They buried him in Africa, a victim of the Cold War. You'll have to read about it. And another martyr was Velma Middleton. Her doctor told her not to go to Africa with Louis Armstrong. She died in Sierra Leone in 1961, a year after two martyrs as jazz ambassadors. They died representing this music of blood on behalf of the State Department. In one case, my father and them went independent. And so Oscar Denied, Phineas heard him, and he played in Memphis. He played with Phineas Newborn, played with two hands. And, you know, Phineas Newborn had the technique of Oscar Peterson and some. And he said He played for Oscar Now. Oscar Now reached over and played everything he played with his left hand. And that sent him into a development process, that was facilitated by that experience. He started practicing around the clock, and that took his playing to another level. But most people, and when Jamal had spoke about him, my father, they said they're talking about him with saying the world doesn't know about him. But I wrote about him in this book. So you get to know a little something about Oscar Now, this great piano genius that heretofore has not really been written about. And people have been guessing about him and wondering about him and listening to his music. And for the first time, his story's told, in book form. So the takeaway for me is just support when you see these efforts emerging, especially self-published effort. I didn't go through a publisher, because then they would have said Upright Bass and Musical Life later, George Joyner. That ain't his name. But if I signed a contract with them, they would have reserved the right to determine what the title was. You know what I'm saying? So that's what it would have been. We're just telling you. We're not asking you. We're informing you of this is the decision. Come on, man. Why am I going to do all this work and then let them be the final custodian of my father's history when they weren't the custodian of it when he was alive? Simple. Now I don't have to be bitter because I got it. I covered it. So that's another reason why you see me like this, because this is a preemptive strike. I don't have to be mad at Jazz Time, the Downbeat, but not talking about my daddy. I already did it. And so I'm offering it for sale, and I'm saying, but not just me, anybody that's doing this, because to be honest with you, and I don't say this to brag, but I don't know anybody my age that self-published a jazz book. I'm talking about in the world. And if you know somebody, leave it in the comment section. Send me verticalvisionsmedia@gmail.com. Send me, I want to meet that person and know who they are. And I don't say I'm not proud of that. There should be a lot more of us writing with the internet and these places of facilitating research. We should be doing, and we have to do a lot more. But the key is that if people are not going to support it, you go to work, you get a paycheck. We have to have a reward structure. Kenny Garrett just read the book. He said he read it twice. I'm getting good feedback, from people that have read it. And like I said, it covers New York from 75. For those who were there throughout the 80s, come on, man. You know what I'm saying? You're talking about a hotbed of musical activity, and the books don't cover it. I cover it in here. So we just need to.
My head is almost exploding.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's
with the number of musicians that
you probably gonna have to do some cut. I don't think you will be able to play all of this. You're gonna have to do some cut.
I don't know about what we will play. And when I'm saying that my head is exploding, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that I am actually excited at the possibilities. You talk about the work that you're doing. If there is anything, I'm serious. If there's anything that I can do to help you, come and call me, because
I will, because I see London. I tell people London kidnapped me because I left the country for the first time right after graduating from Howard University. I felt I had to graduate into seeing the world. So I left and I got stranded in London, man.
Okay.
I know
my daughter's in London. My daughter's in London. I'm in Manchester. So when you talked about the band on the wall and coming there with Gary Crosby and co, the band on the wall is my, if you like, but we've got loads more jazz clubs now.
There was an Indian restaurant across the street, and I had like a paratha with it had vegetables in it.
Oh, you really remember
that place still there?
Yes, it is. It is.
Ooh, man, that was so good, man.
We have to come back.
Yeah, I would love to.
You have to come back.
Yes.
What an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, Muneer Nasser, you've left me with so much to think about. There's thousands of musicians that you've mentioned. The good thing that I need to do this time, though, I don't need to listen. I just need to say, get Muneer's book, don't I? Thank you so much for your time and for taking the trouble to explain why you are so proud to be known as Jamil Nasser's son.
Yes, indeed. Very inspirational person. In addition to being a great musician, he really was a great person. If you met him, and those who have met him can attest to this. And I'm trying to continue that as well. Not just being a good or great musician, be a great person and try to be of service. And
Well,
he certainly did.
well, I think if he were around, he'd be giving you a pat on the back. And I know from up there, he's looking down and saying, "Go on, son." So, yeah, seriously.
Thank you very much.
Muneer Nasser, thank you so much. Really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed this.
God
I guess the next time I see you will be over there, maybe I Van on the Wall.
I hope so.
Manchester.
You take good care of yourself, and
Dude.
God bless.
Okay.
Thank you so much.